We are live.
Woot.
Yes, woot. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. My name is Kelsey D. Crawford. I am a comic artist and illustrator. Usually, I show off art processes and art streams, but today I am interviewing Ben Wright-Heuman and Ian Klesch. Am I saying that right?
You are indeed.
Good, good. I wanted to make sure I got that right. I am talking with these two fine gentlemen out of Columbus, Ohio, to talk about their new short story, Gnome Man's Land. Had to make sure that I didn't get tongue-tied on that one. And we have some folks in the chat already. Hello, Jessica.
Yay, Jessica.
Yes, I'm hoping Carlos will join us later as well. Carlos is another regular who usually pops in. So anyway, I wanted to talk with these fine fellows about their short story and what it was like to collaborate on it for What the Gnomes Know, which is a comics anthology on KickStarter right now. You can back it at tinyurl.com/GnomeComics. We haven't reached our goal yet, so if you can help us get there, that would be marvelous. And
we are so close.
Yes, we are very close. We have a ticker going at the bottom that I'll keep updating as we go.
So keep an eye on it for you, so you don't have to be
cool
trying to interview and doing this at the same time.
Shout out to Arian, Rayner, and Alex for being in the chat with us today. So thank you for tuning in. So, okay. Real quick, before we get into the questions that I have for you guys, because I actually have a list of questions. First, introduce yourselves. We'll start with Ben. Introduce yourself. Who are you? Why should we care?
My name is Ben Wright-Heuman. He, him, and you shouldn't.
I was just thinking
all right, that's the end of the interview. Good night.
Yeah. Okay. I am a freelance cartoonist and illustrator. I'm actually one of the co-founders of Canon Wright Productions, which is putting together this anthology. Rayner's the one running this, but I jump in and help whenever I can. And I was the artist on No Man's Land.
All right. Okay. So Ian, introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do?
So along the same vein of what Ben just said of, why should you care? Like, you shouldn't. You introduced us first as these fine gentlemen. I was like, that is way more respect than Ben and I have ever earned in our lives, right?
Dudes, you are in published comics. That's respect enough.
I always think of the line from Simpsons where Homer just goes, maybe just once someone will call me sir without adding you're making a scene. So I was the writer on No Man's Land.
Justify your
existence. Go. I wrote this story that justifies me, right? No. So I wrote No Man's Land, and I've known Ben for God knows how long. What, 17 years now?
Yeah, 17 years. I did the math earlier.
Jeez.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. That's actually the first question that I have for you was, how did you two meet? Like, because you two have known each other for 17 years. You've just
Yeah. When we first
what was that?
When we first met, I hated him because he stole my roommate.
Okay. We're off to a great start, y'all.
It's just been downhill since then.
So one of my other friends, a guy named Brendan, like he's one of those guys that became a friend of mine because we were in the same orientation group first day of freshman orientation, and we've just been friends ever since. And it, we went to Kenyon College, and there's a housing lottery, and you always get screwed sophomore year in particular because upperclassmen get all the preference. So what we decided to try and get some control over it was we actually were going to try to get a 6-person suite.
Oh.
And one of the people that got brought in, and I was going to be in part of this. I got brought into this by Brendan, and Ian also got brought in. Were you brought in by Brendan or by someone else?
So I think. So I got brought in by Brendan, I think. So Brendan and Thomas, I think, has brought me in. That
might be it.
Because I knew Brendan and I knew Thomas, because Thomas and I were in musical theater together.
That's probably it, because you were in, I can't remember the name of the group. I'm sorry.
Company.
But yeah, so we were getting ready for the housing lottery, and I can't remember. It was like right before the housing lottery was going to happen. The suite thing completely fell apart. Aww. And Ian ended up roommates with Brendan, and I'm like, no, what happened? Who's this jerk?
But it worked out well because Brendan and I were the ones on the couch, 3 TVs and 9 gaming systems. It was the gaming room. It worked out fantastic.
Spent most of sophomore year in their room. Like,
I was about to say, even though you were not roommates, you still ended up hanging out with them.
Oh, a lot. Yeah. I mean, you, Kelsey, you visited me before for cons and stuff. You've seen my place. Yeah. I was worse back then, so it's a good thing. My room is not the hangout room.
No, it is not. I'm saying this as nicely as I can. No,
I know. For anyone who doesn't know, I'm a bit of a slob and a pack rat. But I'm working on it.
Ben ended up living the room above and one over. Like there was a stairwell right there. So they were just pretty much like a 30-second walk away. And so they just, both Ben and Thomas were pretty much always in our room. And it worked out well, right?
Yeah, it worked out great. And it's led to several very long-term friendships.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it great whenever like you make friends in college and they just kind of stick around?
Yeah, it's you know, there's the old saying about how hard it is to make
friends as adults.
Make a friends as an adult, and yeah. So the ones you get from then you keep. Honestly, most of the friends I've made, with the exception of a couple of the Ohio cartoonists like you,
yes.
Honestly, I've made because of going to school. Like it's still either my college friends or people from Center for Cartoon Studies.
Oh yeah, a lot of the friends that I have still are friends that I made when I was going to BG, because I went to Bowling Green State University. That was my alma mater. So you both went to Kenyon, it sounds like.
That's right.
And then after that, Ben, I know you went to the Center for Cartoon Studies. Ian, did you have any other like comics experience after that?
Mine was all informal, right? I just started reading through stuff by Dennis O'Neil on comics theory and whatnot, and Will Eisner, and who was the other one I used to read through?
Scott McCloud.
Scott McCloud, and then who's the other gentleman? He wrote Hulk for like 14 years, and he wrote a book about comics, and it was all his was like far more informal about it, right? But it was just here are some broad strokes. But I remember, I think that was the first book I picked up. I can't think of his name. He wrote Fallen Angels. Peter David. Peter David.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know.
So,
yeah, I vaguely know him because I read Incredible Hulk for a few years. So
what's funny is I didn't even know him from Incredible Hulk. I just know that was what he was known for. So
gotcha.
I ended up with that book somehow, and I read through it, and I got my interest. Started like, well, what if I started finding other stuff? So then I went on to the Dennis O'Neil and then the Will Eisner and Scott McCloud and whatnot. So
oh, the Will Eisner stuff is so good. Like he knows his stuff.
Yeah. Well, my background was in animation and claymation, or stop motion. So it was all visual storytelling, right? And it's a lot of the skills transfer. So
gotcha. Yeah, I was about to ask because like when I was taking a look at the because FYI for anybody who's watching, I served as the editor for what the Gnomes Know Comics Anthology. I gotta say, as somebody who is used to looking at writers' scripts for comics, Ian, yours was one of the better scripts that I have read, if only in terms of formatting, because I have read entirely too many comic scripts that you read it and you're like, oh, you've never written for comics before. Okay. But like, and by that, I mean that other people have clearly not experimented with like visual storytelling, but you had a really good grasp on that, like right off the bat. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
A part of that is that Ian and I were both on kind of a screenwriting track at Kenyon.
Gotcha.
So when we were there was no film department. They have actually got one now, but
the pioneers, both of you.
Kind of. Like one of the big things is we were both drama majors, but there, and so we were kind of making our own film major in some ways because we were taking all the film classes. We weren't that involved with the theater groups. But, you know, sometimes dipping in. But we really found a lot of stuff with film. And one of the big things, there's a Professor Taswell that both of us worked with. Ian, in particular, worked a lot with. And he, like, speaking personally, he taught me to write long form because like the English creative writing classes I did really didn't like work out for me. This is where I learned how to tell a story. And like, even when I write scripts, it's screenplay format first, and then I change it for comics.
Gotcha. Ian, similar experience?
I mean, he nailed. Tazwell was my mentor, right? I mean, I looked up to that dude immensely. To this day, I'm still grateful for everything I learned from him. And it was a lot of drilling into the basics of because he came at it from both a directing standpoint, and that's what I went for, was directing and writing. Is what I wanted to do originally, was film and animation and whatnot. I can't draw, to save my life, but I can do stop motion, which is what I wanted to do. But his big focus was on make sure when you've got a shot, or a picture, or whatever your visual piece is, make it with intention, and that if you're going to make a change, why are you making that change? If you're going to show something, why are you showing it? What are you not showing, and why are you not showing it? Things like that. And then same thing with writing. A big thing he really drilled in was brevity. That if you can show something rather than, same thing with Stan Lee, right? He used to always say if you can show it, or if you can tell it, it's much more interesting to show it. So trying to keep out as much as you can with the medium, right?
Or with Stan Lee, it's more interesting to show it and then cover it with text.
Yeah, well, there's that. But there's the whole thing they used to do, the Nuff Said, right? Where they had, I think it was back in the early 2000s, they did a run where they had, each of the comics only did pictures, no words whatsoever, to tell a story. Some worked really well. Some you're like, I don't think your writer's ever done this before. Because you're like, things were being said. It's not clear what was being said, right? So, yeah. So that's my background, right? Yeah,
very cool. Very cool. So how did you two end up working together for No Man's Land?
I think I had written this. So I have a bad habit, or maybe not a bad habit, maybe a good habit, of when I knew the next one was going to be Gnomes. It was either Gnomes or a different project. I was like, well, what if I just wrote it tonight? So I wrote it that night and I sent it to Ben. I was like, can I use this? He's like, this would work. I was like, cool. And then Ben had already read it. He'd already gone through it. So I think that kind of helped with the pairing up of who was going to do the art for it.
Yeah, because you two, this is the first time that you two have worked together on an anthology that I'm aware of. Because Ian, you worked with Andrew for Less Than Secret, a cryptid anthology, which was the last anthology that we did. Yeah. So did you approach Ben? Did Ben approach you? I don't remember. This is a legitimate question because
I actually do remember. It was during one of the early meetings where we had the entire group there, and we basically realized we had 3 people who wanted to be writers and 3 people who wanted to be artists, and they were kind of perfect matchups anyway. Because we had Rainer and Ariane who they worked together great. We've got Jack and JM who both had wanted to work together for a long time, and then I'm like, dibs. Because like we said, Ian was sorry, I'm looking at the comments. Ian was
I can't figure out how to block that. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
But
it's fine. But yeah, Ian was he wrote that script, and actually one of the funny things is the other project topic we talked about that we're probably going to do for our next thing was robots. So he basically wrote a script that could theoretically work for both. And we'd actually talked about the possibility of continuing the story in the next anthology because this has both gnomes and robots in it. I don't think we're going to do that, but we talked about the idea originally. And that's part of where this whole setup came from.
Gotcha. To clarify, because there seem to be people who are confused in the comments section, this is simultaneously being played on YouTube and Twitch. So anyways, really was kind of the perfect matchup across the board. It really was, actually.
Yeah.
And speaking from the editor's standpoint, it really was, because like every author artist pair up that happened, they ended up working together with their particular strengths really, really well. So that was awesome.
I also have to say, like, one of the problems that I kind of have with a lot of the indie comics community as I've experienced it. I know it's huge and there's a lot of differences, but there's a big push towards not supporting collaboration in the same way that some other parts of the industry do. There's a lot of, I want to do everything myself. And I get that. I do that too. But
I think it's more just from a practical standpoint, at least for me, because it's like I'd like to do everything myself because, like, as far as other collaborators go, I can't really think of anybody who would work well to bring that vision to life, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, yeah. And I still support doing a lot of your work on your own. I'm actually starting to think more about doing the next of my graphic novel series, and that's definitely going to be something that I'm doing all the pieces myself because that's what I've done with the previous books. But like starting with Less Than Secret, when I saw, because we did almost all the stories were solo creators, and then there was Ian and Andrew's story, and they did a great story, and they put it together in like a quarter of the time of most people.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys worked really, really fast in that last anthology.
It was wild. Like, you were some of the only people who actually finished by the deadline, and you got the assignment like a month before it was due. Like, it was ridiculous. And then getting to work with Ian on this, like, I, again, have not done a ton of collaboration. I've started to do a little bit more, and I increasingly appreciate how freeing it can be. Like, to be following sort of another person's ideas. Also, it's ridiculously, you get to create stuff that you never would have come up with.
Oh, yeah. And
that's really exciting also. Like, I am increasingly in favor of the collaborative process in comic making. And a big part of that is...
Would either of you have made a story about gnomes without each other and without this prompt? Just realistically.
No. It's not something would have been. Well, Gnomes may have been in one of my other projects, glancingly, but that not this story, right?
Right.
I would have, but only because my current D&D character is a gnome, and we're like dead serious. We're actually talking about doing some comic stuff. That's one of the things we talked about in the Thursday interview. Nice. Just real quick business to bring up. We've mentioned the Thursday interview a couple times, or I've also seen it mentioned in the chat. Just so people know, we're actually currently having trouble with the Canon Wright YouTube channel. There was some weird stuff that happened this weekend, and currently none of the videos are up on it. It actually looks like they might have gotten deleted. The good news is we still have those, but you'll want to go to the BWH Comics channel because they were simultaneously posted there. So just a heads up, if you're trying to click the links that are on social media, they don't work anymore, or they don't work for now. Hopefully it gets fixed. But
well, it's a good thing that I used current links, and those links are down in the doobly-doo.
Yes. So, okay. Well, thank you.
If you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on Twitch, sorry, you're going to have to look it up, youtube.com/BWH Comics or something like that.
Exactly. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because it's unfortunate. And hopefully in the future you're watching this and it's not a problem. But that's what I was dealing with this weekend. So
there's been so much that's happened this past week. It's just bonkers. We're not going to get into that right now. What we are going to get into is our feelings, particularly Ian. When you wrote this particular script, first of all, how dare you? Second of all, because your story deals it. If we can get into a little bit of spoiler territory for this particular short story.
Absolutely not. No, I'm kidding. I don't care.
Okay. Well, too bad. I'm going to get into spoiler territory to talk about this because your story talks a lot about it's basically an open letter from a parent to a now deceased child, if I remember the details correctly.
Reverse that. It's the child writing to the parent.
Child writing to the parent. Okay. So I wanted to ask in particular, this is a question for Ian, mostly because Ben, you don't have kids. But this could be applicable to you as somebody whose parents are still alive. But Ian, what was your train of thought that led to writing the story the way that it came out? Because I know that was not how it started.
So in all honesty, like I said last time, it started as originally it was just supposed to be over the top, weird act, because I like the idea of like gnomes and robots. Normally I wouldn't see those two things together, right? So I thought, what if you smash them together, right? That'd be fun. Like doing an over the top weird story of gnomes and robots. Then I started thinking, I was like, is that really the story I want to tell, though? And I thought, all right, well, let's flesh out the world a little bit. Let's see what else would be happening. So I guess then that if this is a gnome, it's by himself. Why is he by himself? Does he still belong to another group of people or whatnot? I thought, well, all right, so if he's alone, who is he? Is he older? Is he younger? All right, he's older. So if he's alone, who would he have potentially lost then to be alone now? And I was like, oh, shit, he's probably lost kids. And so I wrote it and then started to think of like, all right, so if I guess this is where I'm going then is, and at the very beginning he puts on some headphones, right? And he's basically playing this tape that he's listened to, what is it, like 178 times? I think it shows the play count on the little thing. And it's the recording from the kid, right? And the idea is that they were on their way out, basically they were about to be overrun by those robots and whatnot, and had a chance to make a recording. So he's listening to this thing, and it's this idea of unprocessed grief that you're still going back and still reliving that moment over and over and over and over, because he's listened to it 178 times, or whatever the exact number is I put in there.
It was 87. Sorry, I just looked it up.
87? So yeah, a ton though, right? So the idea of forcing himself to go back and relive this, for whether it's catharsis or it's just that he has moved on. And it's the idea of what that story is playing on, and there's still parallels of what was happening in that story and that he's listening to, and then what's happening now for him. And I like to think that this one is a little bit of a, like, this time is different, so to speak, in that it seems to be a slightly different outcome by the end of, while listening to this, right? I like to think that hopefully this is the time that something's finally clicking, he's ready to move on. But I mean, I wrote it honestly, you're saying, is it based on having kids? A little bit, but I also wrote it as, if I was to have to write something to my dad, what would I have written, right? And so a lot of that is based off of experiences from my own life, right? I tweaked some things here and there. Like, I remember when I was a kid, my dad and I built a chair. I desperately wanted to build it, and I was doing terribly at it, but he just stuck with me and he built it. And I was like, but it turned, it's a piece of junk, but he still has it in his garage. And it's because I could never build the back, so it ended up being a stool, and so he still has stuff that he uses it as a place to set stuff. But so yeah, that's my rambling way of saying that it started off as a really funny story, and then I was like, well, what if I wrote something more serious, and then eventually something really dark and heavy that was not the original intention. So hopefully that answers the question.
It did answer the question, but also it helped add some variety to the anthology, because a lot of the other stories were like basically D&D spin-offs. And I'm not saying this is a derogatory way or a bad way. Like, being inspired by D&D, absolutely valid. Your guys' short story for your guys' story, No Man's Land, is a standout because of the tone shift that it presents. It's funny because in the last anthology that we did, each story was wildly different from each other. The only unifying theme for that last anthology was cryptids. Like, it was about cryptids. That was about it. And this anthology is, I thought we would be getting the same sorts of results. But turns out a lot of the stories were adventures in some way. But yours was one of the first ones that openly dealt with, let's say, grief. So kudos for doing something that stands out from the rest of the selection of the comics.
You mentioned the D&D thing, and there's actually something kind of funny with that.
Oh, yeah.
So I play a lot of D&D, so that was my first association with a lot of Gnome stuff. Ian hasn't played before, so he doesn't have the same connection that I did. And the problem when I first read this script is I had D&D gnomes in mind. Yeah. So I pictured the entire script with the gnome being about 3 feet tall. And like it was one of those things where the robot I was more picturing being like twice his size, and like it's more like a wrestling thing that ends up happening. And then I just had a click because actually I think it was because of something Angela Boyle said, one of the other people in the group, that made me go, oh, not everyone thinks of gnomes like this. And I actually said to Ian, so how tall do you think the gnome is? And he's like, hold on, let me find like one of my like he has a lot of figurines of like Marvel characters and stuff like that. He's like, hold on. So yeah, pull one out. I was like, yeah, about that big. And I'm like, oh, that changes the context completely. I'm glad I haven't started drawing yet.
So how much did you have to redraw, or did you figure that out during the like thumbnailing stage and you were able to like
I'll be honest, I procrastinated the art on this one a little bit, but so thankfully I hadn't started drawing yet.
Okay. I think you were asking because you were trying to figure out the car piece, and you're like, how is he going to fit inside this thing, and how is there going to be room for anything else? Like, well, he's not like human sized, he's a gnome.
That should have given it away, because here's the thing. It wasn't original. We gave him, actually, I can show this.
Okay, sure.
But one of the ideas we had is that he kind of has like this battle vehicle he's scrounged together. This is a post-apocalyptic setting also.
Yeah.
Mad Max meets gnomes.
Yeah.
What was that?
Mad Max meets gnomes.
Yes. I will say that was another standout about your short story, was the fact that it was post-apocalyptic in theme. I think yours was about the only one with that tone. What we're showing right now is a page from Gnome Man's Land that these two worked on together. That is a great contraption.
It was funny because I think in the original script, didn't mean to do that. In the original script, I think it was actually a skateboard.
I think so, but I think we talked it through one night. I remember you and I was sitting at my kitchen table, and you and I were texting back and forth on Discord, and you're like, I don't think this works like this. I think it's going to be, and I was like, yeah, it makes more sense.
Yeah, because he's a junk collector in a lot of ways. So, but one of the things that was funny about it, if I thought it was a 3-foot gnome, a skateboard makes way less sense. Like, what am I like? Try to picture that. A wagon, fine. A 3-foot kid can fit in a wagon, but yeah. One of the things that, but yeah, this was definitely one of the more fun things to try and come up with. Actually, I can also bring up some concept art in here.
Yeah, sure. Bring that up, because we'd love to see it and see some of the behind the scenes stuffs for this.
Actually,
yes.
I remember when you and I were talking about this. I remember I had, because I was trying to explain what, like, look at the little fold-down canvas pieces, and you and I were trying to figure out, like, all right, if he's out in the post-apocalyptic world, what's he going to need? He's going to need some way of shelter and whatnot. So I remember I had, like, paper I was folding up to try and, like, send you pictures, like, wouldn't it be like this? And you're like, no, it's more like this, because you were just drawing. I'm like, that's cheating.
Yeah.
Wonder if I can actually just, let's see. But yeah, it's fun because a lot of this really was a very collaborative process. We were constantly going back and forth about different parts of things. I'd send him ideas, and he'd be like, well, I was kind of thinking more like this, and I have to figure out how to tweak it and make it work.
Sure, yeah.
Which is great. Also, that's one of the advantages of having done freelance is, like, working with clients teaches you just to be like, okay, I'll do it. You know what I mean?
But you could also tell me no, and I'm usually like, all right, whatever.
Yeah. No, there are definitely times where I'm like, yeah, I don't think that'll work for this reason. But also, like, I don't know. It's one of those things where you quickly learn not to take feedback personally at all.
Yeah.
Which is nice.
The big difference, though, between, like, doing stuff freelance and working with an actual collaborator on a comic is that you do have that back and forth of, well, I really like this idea. How about we try it this way? Or actually, this original part of the script, I think it could be done differently. Why don't we try this instead? Speaking as somebody who also worked with a writer as the artist for a project, that was one of the more fun things about collaborating, was being able to reach out to the writer and being like, what about blah? Or yes. Yeah.
No, I just want to say I have the concept art up whenever you're ready.
Boop. There we are.
There you go.
All right. So that's like a wagon body.
Yep. And you can see from the different colors, there was a lot of, like, experimenting with stuff. like that tarp wasn't originally part of it, and then I came up with the entire way that would mechanically work.
Nice.
That's what I have the fun of, like post-apocalyptic or steampunk or any of that kind of thing. I like trying to figure out the actual practical mechanics of a lot of it.
Yeah,
well, you don't want
like taking existing mechanics and putting it onto current things.
Right.
I'm always how can I phrase this? I hate steampunk where they're just like, I glued some gears on it, therefore it's steampunk. You're like, no, that's not how this works. It's not it's not a an aesthetic look. It's that it's supposed to be functional. And so I like that Ben had done all that with the, how does that actually going to work and what's the point of it and why is it there? It's there for a reason on his cart, right?
It's also part of why a wagon made a lot of sense, because a wagon's already designed to be steered by a device. So all I had to do was modify that. Also, the idea of him sitting on a big old car battery with 2 leaf blowers next to him was pretty fun.
Looks like you guys are not alone on the whole figuring out post-apocalyptic stuff, because Ariane was like, oh, I love trying to figure out the mechanics of steampunk post-apocalyptic stuffs.
Nice.
Yeah, totally get it.
See if
I also appreciate
that
for the concept art, you actually drew each component in a different color.
Yeah, that happened in... I tend to do that with all my stuff. I tend to do backgrounds in blue and characters in theoretically magenta. It's technically just pink, but like I usually do that for a lot of stuff for figuring out different bits. And in this case, like the part on top was a completely separate layer, and I needed to make sure I knew that because it was not in the original design. And we're like, something's missing here. What happens when it rains?
Yeah.
Like this thing has a literal car battery sitting on top of it. It's probably bad to have rain hit it.
I mean, he's getting depressed. He's,
Yeah. Actually, I think I had a design. I don't think I showed it here, but where there were actually slits in the thing on the back so that if it went down, the leaf blower things could still stick out.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I gotta ask for the technical parts, because I know that there are some people who watch my channel on a regular basis who have questions on the technical side of things. So Ben, when you're drawing, what programs do you use to draw your art? Like the concept art, the comic pages, is the concepts done in a separate program from the pages? How does that work?
For this particular project, everything was done in Clip Studio Paint EX.
Okay.
Yeah, I did the entire thing. Now I feel bad. I never asked Rainer about that in our interview this past Thursday. I think he used Procreate, but
I remember that popping up in conversation when he was talking about like applying filters and things like that.
But yeah, like I very often do. For a few of my projects, I do a mix of programs, but increasingly I'm moving more and more to using Clip Studio for basically everything. And in this case, this was all Clip Studio. It like down to I think the thumbnails I did traditionally, but I usually do that.
Gotcha.
I like to do my thumbnails on like index cards and stuff like that. Just make them super small. Be able to see everything and lay them out and then scan them in. But that's the only part of the process that wasn't done in Clip Studio. Yeah.
The overall layout for a page, but making it really small so you don't get lost in the details. I like that.
Exactly. And one of the biggest problems with working digitally is it's so easy to get proportions wrong because you zoomed in. Which is why I like to have that one traditional step early on so I have a gauge.
Yeah. Not to neglect you, Ian, I'm going to ask you the same or similar question. So how do you write your scripts? Is there a special program that you use? Do you use Google Drive, Scrivener? What do you use?
It honestly depends on, so I have severe ADHD. So it usually depends on where do I happen to be and what do I have around me. So I write on my Chromebook, I will write in a notebook, and I will write on my phone. So my favorite is to actually sit down with a notebook and write. And I've got this leather bound book that I write and whatnot. Well, I try to reserve that for a certain project I'm working on, which is a larger project. I think this one I literally wrote on my phone, pacing in my kitchen. There's a an app I found like a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that, where it was specifically like, what, there's got to be an easier way to be able to write something on my phone. Like if I'm out somewhere and I get the idea, then like I want to be able to do it right now while I actually have, my brain is able to focus. Then
right. While your brain's like, I have a thought, it needs to be written down.
Yeah. So I was like, if I've got something right, where can I do that? And so, I looked at it like, well, there's this. I think it's called Dubscript. And so it works on my tablet, it works on my phone. So I was like, all right, this is easy. I can quickly, knock it out. And I use swipe text, right? So I can do it all very fast.
Nice.
And I think I know I wrote the cryptid story that way. This one, I think I started on my phone, and then I finished it later on. I was like, I'm just gonna go finally sit down. And so like I got out my Chromebook and sat and did it there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's mostly in Dubscript because it does all the formatting. It does it in screenplay format, which is, for me, visually, it's really easy to see what's text, what's not.
Mm-hmm.
And Ben, keep me honest here. Did I do this one in Word, or did I do it did I send you a PDF of it?
I want to say you sent me a document I could edit, so it was probably in Word.
Okay, maybe I copied it over or something like that. Maybe I started in Dubscript and then finally just decided to move it over to Word. Whatever it was, right? So clearly I don't have a consistent process. I do whatever works at the moment.
Right.
But then usually if I end up within, if I got stuff in a book that I've handwritten, then I'll just go and I'll throw it into one of those programs, whatever's the fastest.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to, even if I'm writing in Word, I try to always format the exact same way of, indentations and whatnot to make it clear as to what's dialogue, what's action, what's a page break, and there were certain ones in here where I definitely had to make sure that we talked through, like, this has got to be a page flip moment, right? So you need to have, it has to take up this much space, it has to be this pacing, because otherwise you're going to have one of the big things I'm not a huge fan of in comics is when there's supposed to be this big reveal, like, oh my gosh, it's shocking, but it's at the bottom of the second page. Like, you're not blind. You're going to see it as soon as you flip, right? Like the page turn has to be the reveal, whether it's at the top, it's the first panel, or it's the last panel that spread. You can't have the bottom of this 2-page thing with this giant panel, somebody getting stabbed. Like, well, now I know right away that's happening, right? Like, your eyes travel. So I try to keep that in mind of, like, when you're reading, how does that flow? What does that mean? And that you're going to, subconsciously, whether you mean to or not, look ahead as soon as you flip that page, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
it's just right there. It's in the spread.
Yep. So.
Speaking of that, actually, just because I think it's a good example of the layout and things like that and what's being talked about, I'm sharing a page right now, 2-page spread, probably my favorite from this project. And one of the things that's kind of cool is that this was actually Ian's idea entirely. Like, he drew a quick thumbnail and it's like, do you think we could do something like that? I'm like, yeah, let me figure it out. And we kind of collaboratively got that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was.
Heck yeah.
It was kind of an interesting situation.
Yeah. And speaking from a just comics visual perspective, the very last panel in this 2-page spread, the one with the arm going fling and tossing the gnome, the way that the gnome is thrown through the air actually helps guide the eye to turn the page. So,
no, stop it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, were you yelling at your program?
Of course I was yelling at my program. That's my secret, Captain. I'm always yelling at my program.
That's fair. But yeah, the way that the toss of the gnome helps to also guide the page turning is just, it's stellar. Because it's like, where's the gnome gonna go? Turn the page.
It was also a lot of fun, like, kind of coming up mechanically with what was happening here. Because he had told me, he's basically reconfiguring the arm into a catapult and all this stuff. But, like, just he's overextending the joint, basically. Got 2 ends of the wire that he can pull. And it's a catapult now.
Nice.
What's funny is when you drew this robot, like I had no idea what the robots looked like in my mind. I just like, it's a robot. It's got a broken hand. That's all I know, right?
Yeah, I can also bring up concept art for the robot. Actually,
sure. We love good concept art. Shout out from Joy Song Photography. That is awesome. Who doesn't love a good catapult? And Ariane says page flips are so important. Oh, that's the photography person, somebody that you know?
That's Ian's wife.
I might know them a little bit. Yeah.
Well, hello, Ian's wife. Thank you for joining us in the chat today.
Let's see. Where's the robot art?
While you're figuring that out, let me look at, because like I said, I have a list of questions that I can ask y'all. We were talking about collaborations earlier. So when you two were working together on this, other than the fact that you two know each other as friends, what spurred you two to work together on this story? Like, what do you two look for when you're looking for a comics collaborator?
So I think, and we started talking about a project years ago, and it's still on our back burner. It's a very large one. And it's been built and destroyed as far as an idea, and we're finally at like 90% of the way through, I think, of the actual rough idea. But years ago when we first started discussing it, Ben had drawn some, like I had written a basic intro, which is no longer anywhere in the story, right? It's a vastly different feel. But I remember Ben drawing out the panels and being like, this is not at all how I imagined it, but I really like it. So I think Ben's got a very interesting eye of visually laying things out in a way that I don't expect, but that I resonate with, that I really enjoy. And so that's part of why I'm big on collaboration. Is in any art form, I think it's always beneficial, right? I always go back to, I think I said this last time for the Cryptid Anthology as well, which is that the band Gorillas, one of the big things is if you collaborate, then, we bring in other artists, you get a new perspective, and therefore it's probably going to turn out better than it would have if you just try to do it all yourself. And I remember reading that, a quote from them years ago about that. And I was like, that makes a lot of sense, because then it gets me out of my own head. And it's like, there've got to be things that I'm not thinking of that somebody else is. For example, like I had no idea what the robots looked like. Ben did. Ben knew right away what they looked like.
Yeah.
So
and, like, I feel that as a fellow neurodivergent person, where it's like you can get caught up in particular details that you kind of forget to step away from the project to really get another look at it. So collaborating in that way is also helpful, to have another set of eyes look at it and be like, what about this? Yeah, absolutely. Ben, what was it that drew you to work with Ian, other than the fact that you two knew each other?
Well, first off, like Ian said, we've been talking about working on a project for a long time and have gone back and forth with it. And like one of the things that for me is always important is open lines of communication with a lot of this stuff. Ian is one of the people I go to with scripts all the time, like when I've written stuff, because he's blunt, but he gives very good advice on a lot of stuff. Sometimes I got to talk to him a little bit to figure out what he means, but he's usually right when I finally get that broken down. Actually, I can tell a fun anecdote with that. So my very first,
I know this story.
No, you got one too, which you'll get to share after. But when doing my first graphic novel, The Letters of the Devil, I had the Kickstarter running, and it was doing pretty well. And I was about to do an announcement saying that, as one kind of cool thing about this, I've started the process on the sequel, The Letters of the Devil 2. And I'd sent the script to Ian because I had the whole thing written. And Ian gives me a call, and he says, "Okay,
was it a call, or did I just shoot you an email?"
No, you called me. I was on the phone. I was actually hanging out with my friend Trixie, and got this call from you. Or maybe you sent me a text, and I called you. I was like, "I need to know what you're talking about right now." But he's like, "You cannot do this. It ruins the universe you've created." And I'm like, and here's the thing that Ian did not know. I literally had a post announcing that the sequel was coming out that was going up in like a couple hours. And I was just like, I don't know what you're referring to yet, but I'm going to stop that post because we need to talk.
I stand by my original statement with what had been written at the time, at least.
Yeah, but like what I found out is like there were like after I got to talk to him about it, because he contacted me directly because he knew this was something that I needed to know right now, even though he didn't know I was about to announce it. And after talking about him, I got a list of feedback stuff because it wasn't a first draft. I went through and fixed a lot of it because he was right. There were some serious problems with the story, but it was just really funny getting that right before I was going to announce.
Right before announcing a sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Ian, you had an anecdote. So, what is this anecdote that you had? Oh.
Ian, you're muted.
You hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, but yeah, my headset all of a sudden disconnected for whatever reason. So for mine, so Blood is the Devil 1.
Yeah.
I think, was it that one that this happened with? Where
no, this happened in college, I think. I think this might have been one of my screenplays.
No,
I don't even remember what the script was.
I want to say it was Blood is the Devil 1 because you were all proud of it and whatnot, and I came back with, look, I'm big on feedback, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, right? Or not indifferent, but like all feedback is good feedback. Even if it's feedback you don't want to hear, it's good because it tells you either keep doing what you're doing or stop doing that and start doing something else, right? So it's never, if someone is taking the time to give you feedback on something that's not just like, you suck, it's because they are invested in what's happening, right? They're not going to take the time out to tell you otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, sometimes take with a grain of salt, right? Sometimes the person is, you're like, I'm not going to do that one. But it's always beneficial of, this is what you're, this is what I need you to work on, because it gives you focus. Anyways,
sure.
And sent me the script. I wrote all these notes like this and this and this and this and this. And I'm very direct because I want to make sure that I'm not confused in what I'm saying. I'm just gonna be like very blunt of, this is gonna change, this works, this doesn't, yada yada yada. And I sent it off to Ben, and he just sent back a note that said, "We're no longer friends." What is it, like, we're no longer friends, but you're right, but I hate you. I'll call you soon. Something along those lines.
You know what? I bet it was roulette. That feels right.
That might be right.
It was probably it was probably the original script for that.
I just remember you're like, we're not friends. You're right, but we're not friends anymore.
Was there a lot of that going on with No Man's Land, or were you two like on the same page throughout most of it? Or was there a lot of like back and forth and being like, nope, we're done. We're not friends anymore. Click.
I don't think so.
Like, that's one of the, first off, just so we're 100% clear, it was a joke.
Yeah.
He always gives me crap about this, but it was a joke. But it's funny. But with No Man's Land, another thing is, like, I'm pretty sure the project, if it's the project I'm thinking of that Ian actually gave me that feedback on, it was a project from 10 years ago. I've been a freelancer since then. I went to the Center for Cartoon Studies, which one of the best things to me about the Center for Cartoon Studies is they taught you how to give and receive feedback pretty well.
Okay.
They taught you kind of how to recognize the difference between harsh feedback and toxic feedback, because there is such a thing.
What was the second one you said?
Toxic feedback.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. That in some ways also the delivery method can make a big difference and stuff like that. And like I did kind of start to, so there wasn't any of that problems really with this script. There were times where there were communication errors. Like I mentioned the size issue, but the whole trick with that is I look into it and was like, okay, why is there a miscommunication here? Like, what am I not understanding? And when I figured out that was the issue, I asked Ian directly and we figured it out. Like,
communication,
open communication. Yes.
I think it helps that I mean, part of our friendship, right, is to give each other a hard time, but it has been, we've known each other for 17 years and that's just built into us at this point, right?
Yeah. Once you've known each other for long enough, you speak like your own language and nobody else gets it.
But at the same time, like I talked to you, I remember, was it like last year? You and I talk pretty much every day over whatever it may be, right? Whether it's gaming or just hanging out or whatever it is. And there was a couple days where I hadn't heard from Ben, and I texted him. I was like, "Are you alive? Is everything okay?" And he goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. No, I just have company in town, and so I was trying to be a good host and not text people." I was like, "Okay, thank God." I was worried, like, did I offend you? Are you dead? Do I need to come over to your apartment and check on you?
Yeah.
No,
but
it's one of the other
going up to somebody being like, "Hello, my good bitch," and they like go silent, and you're like, "Oh God, did I go too far?"
Yeah, one of the other things is that like Ian and Ian is the token extrovert friend, one of a couple I've got, but he's much more outgoing and sociable than I am. And sometimes I just will go home and be just completely shut down and cut myself off from people for a while.
Oh, I totally get that.
So,
yeah.
like, it was funny to me when Ian. Yeah. Also, when Ian's like, "Is everything good? We haven't talked for several days." Like, I haven't talked to anybody in several days. It's been awesome. Yeah. When we were in college, Ian used to joke I was his go with guy because I just like whenever he wanted, that was basically how I did anything social. He'd be like, "Hey, I'm gonna go to the market and pick up some stuff. You want?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go with."
Sure.
I was the go with guy.
Yeah.
Wherever you're going, he's like, "Yeah, I'll go with you." You're like, "All right, cool." And that's how you and I got to be friends. Was like on those walks down to get. We used to get market dogs. They were 50 cents a piece for hot dogs, and we'd go down there and we, $2. You're a poor college student, you can get 4 hot dogs. Why not?
Oh, heck yeah.
So we used to go really we'd take that 50-minute walk and hang out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My favorite thing with those market dogs was when we figured out the math of when it was more affordable to get, like, how many hot dogs you had to get with a bowl of chili to make an affordable amount of chili dogs. Like, do you remember that? Because they also sold chili dogs, but we were like, we broke the system. We know how to make it cheaper.
I think it was like $1.50 for a chili dog. You're like, or if I get one bowl of chili, it comes down to like 25 cents. Yeah.
Yeah, something ridiculous.
By the way, last time I was at Kenyan, they're $1.25, which is wrong.
That's heartbreaking.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I brought it up earlier, by the way, but we do have the concept art for the.
Yes, I wanted to bring that up, but I didn't want to interrupt the good times. So we were talking about the robot concept art, which is what we're showing off right now. Is robot concept art. So
I have thought quite a bit about Android designs, and they tend to honestly, a lot of my Android designs, different things look basically the same. But for the ones in this, I knew I wanted red eyes because red eyes are scary. You want Terminator versions.
Sure.
But there are little weird tech things that I tend to put in a lot. The big one I always like pointing out are I love doing piston arms.
Mm-hmm.
And the main thing that I always have to remember when I'm designing them is that they work the exact opposite of biceps and triceps.
Yes, they do.
You're familiar. Cool.
Well, I'm familiar with how biceps and triceps work as somebody who did weightlifting for a while.
Oh, yeah. I also kind of wanted to have the hands almost work like a tendon situation. Like, a lot of people don't realize this. The controls for your fingers are down here.
Yep.
Like, it's all just tendons going up here, and the muscles are actually here, causing all the stuff to happen. And I kind of wanted them to have the exact same thing on robots. When I'm drawing robots, I'll often do it much more piecemeal than I'll do anything else. Like, I'll very often just draw each individual piece and figure out how that exactly will work and connect to everything else. So we had a lot of fun with that. Also, because a lot of this deals with a broken robot, I had to figure out what that looked like.
Mm-hmm. Like, and that exactly would be falling apart and what that would look like.
Exactly.
Dude, it came out great.
By the way, tip for anybody who's designing robots and wants them to be broken: don't make the hands different. You have any idea? At the time, I remembered. Okay, wait a minute. Which hand has which stuff broken? This is actually important.
Mm-hmm. It's always a comic artist's job to make life more difficult for themselves. Speaking of somebody who I keep joking about this, and I will keep joking about this because it's funny and also accurate. There's been times where I'll be like, I'm going to draw a library scene, and there's going to be a ton of books, and then I like actually sit down and draw it, and I'm like, book.
Yeah.
And then
my
without
favorite
learning my lesson at all, I'm like, I'm gonna draw a crowd scene, and there's gonna be a lot of faces. Face. Why do I do this to myself? Face.
Eventually,
So, like,
that's enough face. 4 people, that's a crowd. That's a
yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite example of that, I did a story called The Man in Green, which was actually one of my first like all digital comics. It's the comic I did to teach myself Clip Studio.
Okay.
But one of the problems with doing digital comics is you can zoom in, and it's really easy to get lost in details that nobody's going to ever see. And one of the there was a shot that was like looking down on theater. And so the top balcony, I decided that's close enough that I need people to be able to see the people in the balcony. And by the end, I was just drawing characters from other comics as cameos. Like, I think I drew my entire class from the Center for Cartoon Studies. I drew, by the way, there's a robot in there too, because I decided to throw one of the robots from one of my other comics in there.
Hang on, I've got a copy of this sitting here. Hang on.
Pick up the file, we could zoom in on it. But
Yes, I am all for this.
Yeah.
Also, highlighting Ariane's comment. LOL, oh no, now I have to draw this as such a mood. Accurate. Also, Jessica was there for the crowd scene. She was, because like back in this particular crowd scene that I was talking about, it was for The Legend of Jamie Roberts. The crowd scene in particular was, God, it took like 2 weeks to draw. It was like in the middle of chapter 5, I think it was. The Man in Green. Are we about to see the page magic?
Yeah, you'll have that up faster than I will.
Yeah.
All right. So remember where it's at in the story. It's
the last act, so it's pretty late.
Okay.
Yeah. Find the nudity and go 1 page over. This is also my only comic with nudity in it. Fun fact.
Yeah. Oh, I will say, as far as like including IRL people or like media people in background stuff, I will say that was one of my favorite things about working on Validation, because half of the story took place at Comic-Con, so I could draw whatever pop culture figure I wanted in the background and it fit. Oh man.
And then, yeah, exactly. And the real fun thing is like underneath, it's basic, fake people on the balcony underneath, because no one's going to be able to see those. That's fair. But no one can see the ones up top either. Like, not have to do all that work.
Yep.
But yeah, it's definitely fun. Oh, hey, Jessica just read The Man in Green. Yeah, that was a fun ghost story. Like, that was... I remember when I made it, I was thinking of... I don't know if anyone's ever seen The Howling. It's a classic horror movie.
Nope.
But it's all about werewolves, and I really was kind of picturing the last scene of it for some reason when I was making this. And I hope I kind of captured that old school horror energy of, less about special effects or anything like that, as things are weird and creepy and take a while to build.
Yeah. Speaking of like weird and take a while to build, Ian, I just saw a glimpse of the mug that you were drinking out of. What?
It's
nice.
the Mandalorian sigil from Star Wars, right?
Dude.
Nice.
It's the mythosaur, or at least
I actually never
right?
caught that.
Dude.
Yeah, Ian's house is
it's full of nerd stuff, right? I mean, we've got the giant Star Wars display behind us with the lightsabers, and those are actually my daughter's Star Wars comics. She picked those out for a display. So
his daughter, both of his kids are awesome. What's funny is that his oldest daughter is inheriting the sense of humor.
Oh boy.
From both parents, and it's already funny. Like, she's got good comedic timing. for a 7-year-old. Honestly, for anybody, she's pretty. She also just completely owns me on a number of occasions, and it's great.
I mean, that's what 7-year-olds do. Like, have you ever hung out with a 7-year-old? Any 7-year-old, not just Ian's kids.
I've hung out with a few. This kid's smart. I will say that. Like,
she's going to be dangerous.
My favorite anecdote about her. This is when she was a little bit younger, but she came up. You know which one I'm going to say. She was walking around with a toy microphone, and she just walks up and sticks it in my face and goes, "Say something." I'm like, I'm trying to be good, uncle. I'm like, la 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 la, and she just perfect timing. Just goes, "Wow, that was terrible."
But she turns around, she goes, "I'm just kidding." Or like,
and I'm like, "No, you don't need to apologize. That was perfect timing. I knew it was a joke."
Good to know Ben getting owned by the youths is a theme.
Yes. Hi, Haley. But yeah, one of the other things that was great, I remember there's sometime we were talking about we were talking about Encanto, because that's what you talk about with kids.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And like one of the things that came up was a song We Don't Know About Bruno, and she was drinking from like a kid's sippy cup. And I told her a trivia thing. Is like, did you know that the original name of that character was going to be Oscar, but they changed it because of the song? And she did this perfectly. It was like perfect, like shocked cup drop.
Cup drop. Brilliant.
She's gonna be funny.
Oh man.
She's already funny, but like she grows up, she's gonna be like terrifying funny.
Absolute force.
Yeah. So because if this is part of the collection of comics. Like, I've collected comics for years, right? And so now she does too. And one morning, it's stupid early on a Saturday morning, and my wife and I are just hanging out waiting for the kids to they're hanging out, they're playing. All right, we'll get up here in a little bit.
Sure.
And my daughter comes in, she goes, "Hey, Dad." I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "So you know how you keep all of your comics in bags and boards to protect them?" I'm like, "Yeah." She goes, "Well," I'm like, "Oh no, what got ruined, what got dropped on, what got spilled on?" She goes, "None of my comics have those. Do you think we can get some?" I'm like, "Oh, thank goodness, yeah, we can do that. We can do that."
Oh, the way that you were telling that, I was like, "Oh no."
I know. I was like, "Well, it's fine. I guess it's just a decade and a half of collecting down the drain."
Oh, you started them early. Oh no, how dare you?
I know.
You're just never going to know what solid
paper is not surprised. I'm just like, I can't wait for Piper to get to be about, hit the teenage years and be like, "Dad, I don't know how to tell you this, but I'm into sports." And he's like, "I have no daughter." Meanwhile, her sister's like,
right here.
Yep.
If we also, sorry.
No, I was going to say, before I open up the Q&A part of the live stream, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share about anything?
I just wanted to potentially share the concept art for the gnome, which I have up.
Ooh, yes. Let's share that. What inspired this? Break it down for us, because that is not like any other gnome I've seen. It's definitely not like Harold. Here, I'm going to bring up Harold. It's definitely not like Harold here.
Yeah, the gnome went through a few iterations, but for the most part, a lot of the concept was pretty much there as soon as I heard steampunk gnome. Like, there are a few things that you just kind of want to have in there. I always like it when gnomes have like pointy boots. Pointy boots are just fun in fantasy. Sure. I also tend, especially for something like this, to go for as practical as possible. The biggest tricky thing was figuring out the earbud situation, because like he's supposed to have like an old school iPod on his back, and like especially once they realized he wasn't 3 feet tall, they got a lot tougher.
Yeah.
And I also knew I was going to have to be drawing it a lot. So actually, originally the screen was supposed to have text on it, and I just kind of said, no, don't make me do that. There's going to be too many positions. It's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah.
So that's why there's the panel that says to your point, Kelsey, of how did the back and forth conversation go? But I was like, I can't include it. Like, can we just throw it in as a text box then somewhere so we can keep that information? He's like, oh yeah, that's fine. So then we got it.
Yeah.
It worked fine. Like, that was a 15-second conversation. There was no fighting on it, right? It was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And like it took a little bit of figuring out. But yeah, one of the other things that was fun is coming up with having like those earbuds right there to kind of because part of the thing is he's missing some of the sound cues around him, so he has to be able to hear things. And it was just kind of fun thinking of like he's got 2 giant speakers next to his head. Oh, and there are like 2 like actual batteries hooked into the back that had to be like hot wired in there.
AAA's wired in.
Yeah. But yeah, it's one of those things where he actually controls it by just going whap. Yeah.
Brilliant.
There was actually one kind of fun thing. I'll see if I can quick get to the art for it. Oh yeah. This was a dummy for a poster in the background we were doing.
Nice.
Let's see. There we go. So this was my original design. Which was kind of rough. And what was really funny about it is Ian saw this, and his first question is a gnome allowed to not have a beard?
Like, is that legally allowed? Is that...
Very important legal distinction.
Yeah, it's funny because like I mentioned I play a gnome in D&D right now. He's completely clean shaven. Like he has a baby face. But yeah, so I had to figure out quick, okay, beard. Yeah, it works.
Just hastily adding a beard just in case.
But yeah.
Also, beard makes more sense, I feel like, in a post-apocalyptic, because you're not going to take the time to shave on a daily basis, right? You'd have to, at the very least, have stubble, I would think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're not going to have, like, constant access to a mirror, or at least a whole one, or, like, implements to shave or anything like that. So that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, you see the
people in post-apocalyptic settings.
Yeah, you see the note for the around 12 inches so that I could remember.
Yeah, but you managed to keep the whole like gnome tinkering with things element in there, which I don't know if that's like exclusive to role playing and Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. But whenever I think of like gnome tinkers, that's kind of where my first thought goes to.
Yeah, like a lot of gnome stuff is tied into a lot of different small fantasy creatures. Like you could kind of make arguments for using like elves, brownies, pixies, stuff like that, and reflavoring a lot of that. And there are a lot of stories about about small creatures like that coming in and helping people and like doing crafting work and stuff like that. There's the famous one about the cobbler who every day is having these small beings coming in and fixing shoes. And that's for D&D in particular and stuff like that. That's largely been tied into gnome lore.
Yeah.
Also, Rainer made a funny point during his stream where we're trying to figure out for Rainer and Ariane's story, there's a big part of it is people are hunting for gnomes and like doing all this dark stuff. Like, is there any precedent for that in there? And Rainer's response was the Smurfs.
Yeah. I was about to touch on the interview that you did with Ariane and Rainer because they talked a lot about the lore of gnomes and small folk in general. Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and take a second to open up the floor, aka the live chat, to anybody who may have questions for Ben and Ian or one or the other. This is the Q&A section, as it were. So if you have a question for either of these fine gentlemen who I've been talking with for the last hour and 9 minutes, go ahead and share that in the live chat if you're comfortable sharing questions, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. I'm trying to think of a good question for y'all that's not on my list. Okay. I'm trying to remember the name of this movie. It was the old Disney movie, but it was a live action movie. I think it was Darby O'Gill and the Little People. Have either of you seen that one?
I think I've heard of it. It had didn't have a young Sean Connery in it.
I think so.
And I think there was a banshee that I know someone talked about being one of the scariest things they ever saw as a kid.
Yep.
But I haven't seen it.
That banshee was terrifying.
See, now I'm gonna have to look this up. Not with my kids, but
yeah.
I think the little people in that movie were more referenced to be leprechauns because it was very like almost explicitly Irish.
Actually, fun fact for a custom homebrew setting I was making, I did make a sub race of gnomes that were called chance gnomes, which were basically leprechauns.
Oh,
or luck gnomes, one of the two. I can't remember. It was fun because I got to give them like they had some luck based abilities because luck was a separate mechanic in this setting. Sure. But one of the other ones is they had a magical ability to convince people that mundane objects were actually made of gold.
Perfect.
Yeah, like just temporarily they could like sort of bedazzle them and make them think, yeah, check it out, it's real gold. Bye. And then like shortly after they'd be like, wait a minute.
It's like the poor man's Midas touch.
Yeah.
Pretty much, but like that's classic Leprechaun, like the gold disappears.
It is classic Leprechaun. Ariane has a question for the both of you. What was the hardest part of collaborating with each other?
Looking at his stupid face.
That's fair. That's fair. No. Honestly, I don't know. Probably staying on. You and I are really bad about getting off topic when we have conversations. We are very bad about getting distracted. Like our conversations do this usually, and then we eventually end up over here. But that's probably the hardest part for you and I collaborating is staying on track and not getting off and suddenly discussing a 1980s movie or whatever, right? Some random obscure comic from Superman, right? Like whatever it may be, right? That's probably the hardest part. Staying on track.
Yeah, for me, there's a bit of timing difference between how the two of us work. It took me a long time to start working on this project. And I think that's pretty typical of a lot of cartoonists is they very much do their work when they're under the gun. Like we had, I think 6 or 7 months for the original deadline. And Ian had the script already done before he knew he was working with me. At least a rough draft of it. And I probably didn't really start working on it until about 2 months before the deadline. And Ian was cool about it, but he was periodically being like, so how's the project going?
Well, more like I would see updates in the chat. I'm like, are we behind schedule? Like, I have no concept of this, right? I'm like, are we good? Do I need to push you? What am I supposed to? What am I doing? This? Do I poke you? Is that the right response to this?
And the thing that's funny is like when I was actually doing the work and like I basically was for several weeks just working on this and I just was completely in it. And then and this was not fair to Ian, but I would send requests for feedback on a specific page and then get mad that he wasn't responding immediately. But I'm like, I shouldn't, not like being rude to him mad, but like personally getting mad and just kind of having to check myself. But it's like,
what's funny when you had the biggest,
do this.
When you had the biggest chunks for me to look at, we were on vacation at the time. And so we were in a different time zone. So I was not always seeing right away. We were also with my wife's family. And so I wasn't checking my phone nearly as frequently as I do when I'm home, right? But so I was like, oh, well, you sent like 5 requests. I should probably look at this. I'll be right back, guys.
No, and 100%. Like it was not fair for me to be getting annoyed, but it was just one of those things where it's like, well, now I'm late, so and I want to blame you. But it's my fault for getting to this last minute. That was like the only conflict I think we had this whole thing. And
like just the asynchronous timelines at which you two moved.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's legit. Yeah, that's legit. Well, to be fair, sometimes writing can be done a lot faster than actually drawing something.
Yeah.
To your point, Ben, of me having written before it was even due, I technically have for the next project I wrote a script for that also already. I sent it to Ben. I was like, "Is this good? Can I use this? Is this? Is it?" By the way, if you thought this one was dark, Kelsey, the next one was far worse.
This is a robot story.
Yeah.
This is what?
It's a robot story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is one where actually
the territory.
Yeah, this where we are actually talking about shopping around to a few people, get some eyes on it before we approve it for the story. It's that dark, like potentially darker than A Mother's Love dark.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So,
if anybody has not seen A Mother's Love, Ben actually made a animated video about it, which you can watch on his YouTube channel.
And Kelsey did most of the voice work, which was great.
I did do most of the voice work. So if you want to hear my dulcet tones doing character voices, there you go. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to ask in the live chat. Yes. I
would personally really like to do more of those. It was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember offering it to the group and I was the only person interested in having one made. And I'm like, okay, cool. That's fine. But
yeah, Ariane says, now I low-key want to be Ian's artist for Robot Story, but also I want to write and draw my own story.
Ariane, I'll drop my Ben, unless you have any objections, I'll drop my script in the folders. People, if they want to look at it, they're watching this and are curious to what I mean by a darker story. I'll drop it in there so people can look through it.
Yeah.
But again, we need other eyes on it because there's some things I'm like, can I get away with that? Can I do that?
Yeah. Honestly, before you drop it, you might want to put a trigger warning at the beginning.
That's fair. That's fair.
Oh, geez, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I like exploring things of. I am big on ideas of, and whether or not not taking a stance personally as a person, as a reader, or as a writer, or not, but for a character trying to decide, do ends justify means? And so that each person personally having to decide within the story, do my actions justify, or are my actions justified by what the end goal is? And if it's an altruistic goal, but a less than altruistic or a less palatable way of getting there, does that make it okay? It's a theme I like to explore in a lot of stories. And so,
and I also want to be clear, it's a very good script, which is one of the things that makes it. That's part of why we're. There's a lot of us being a little hesitant to talk about it because there are some very dark themes in it. It's a very good script, which is why we're considering it. We just need to make sure that it fits with the tone of what we're doing, within the limitations.
Yeah. But that is for next anthology.
Yeah. Sorry, I got off topic.
But we would definitely be working on it if this Kickstarter got funded.
That's right.
This is the part where I'm going to obligatory plug. The story that we've been talking about, No Man's Land, shows up in What the Gnomes Know, a comics anthology, which is on Kickstarter right now. We are very close to hitting our goal. So if you want to back it, head to tinyurl.com/Gnome Comics. I'm going to keep doing that. But there's also a link. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's a link in the doobly-doo. I'll go ahead and show the link on the screen right now because I made a banner for this. tinyurl.com/Gnome Comics. If you would like to back it and get your own rewards.
Yeah. One other note on that. There are currently early bird specials up for the next, I think about 36 hours are left in it. So if you're interested
if you want those early bird specials, back it in the next 36 hours, y'all. Yeah,
the early bird special gets you a poster along with your book, and the poster is the cover designed by Kelsey Crawford.
That I drew. I drew the cover and the poster for this project.
I love the cover.
The comics editor.
I love it so much.
Aww.
Yeah, it's a very good cover.
Thank you.
Honestly, this is something that I really like being able to have in any of these projects, is being able to bring in creators to just. We've had 2 killer covers so far, and I can't wait to have more of them.
It's back to collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Having multiple people working on it, and you just get the best from everyone, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, come to think of it, one of the other fun things is Kelsey is the reason Less Than Secret had an editor too, and a cover artist, because Kelsey
because
brought
JD
in.
was somebody that I knew, and I was like, "Hey, JD would like to work on this project, but they're still recovering from a injury at the time. But they'd like to jump on as like a comics editor. Do we have space for that?"
And it's funny because like Rainer and I were a little bit on the fence about bringing anyone else in, because it's like, okay, how do we pay people? What are we going to do? This was our first project, and we were figuring this out.
Yeah.
And one of the things that turned out to be a great decision. It was great working with them and getting to and that cover was an absolute killer. And for this project, we were like, okay, who's interested in doing cover art and or editing? And Kelsey was immediately like,
I just jumped right in. I was like, I'm up for it. Well, at the time too, I didn't really have any gnome related stories. I thought we were going to jump into robots, and I was like, yay, robots. And then you were like, gnomes. And I was like, fuck.
Yeah, no, hey, robots are coming next. Honestly, the reason we did gnomes first is because we decided I did a lot of the legwork on the first project. So we're like, Rainer, we want to do an alternating thing where I handle one, Rainer handles one, and we just keep switching so we don't completely burn out.
Right.
And Rainer looked at the two of those and was like, I think I'd rather do gnomes and you can do robots. And I'm like, that's perfectly fine with me.
Sure. Yeah.
And it made sense because it turns out Rainer knows a lot about gnomes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, he does. Okay. So we have been going for about 1 hour, 21 minutes. And it looks like other people's curiosity has been satiated because they're not asking any other questions for the Q&A section. So, guys, thank you so much for joining in and chatting with me about your comic short story.
Thanks for having us.
No, it's a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. For anybody who is still hanging out in the chat with us, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you to everybody in the chat who's been commenting. Y'all have been great. If you would like to back this campaign, it's What the Gnomes Know, a comics anthology. Head to tinyurl.com/Gnome Comics. I'm going to keep doing that.
I love it.
Yes, and head on over, back the campaign. We still have early bird specials going for another 36 hours. So be sure to get those while you still can. Any final thoughts that you two would like to share before we sign off?
If you're interested in more of my work, you can also find me at BWH Comics on Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. It's also my website, bwhcomics.com. I also have a running webcomic called Cospain, a weeb comic about cosplay and convention craziness at cospaincomic.com.
Yep. And I had the foresight to include those links in the YouTube doobly-doo. So all of those links are going to be down there in the pants part. Ian, where can we find you online? Are we able to find you online, or are you the original internet cryptid?
I'm the original internet cryptid. I probably should have all of those things. I just don't. I don't even have one for myself. Like, just as a person, I'm not online. I need to be and be involved in those things. I always joke that I had Facebook when it first came out. Like literally it was just for college and whatnot. And I was like, cool, I have it. Does that count? Can I stop using it now? Is that good enough? So
yeah, you were smart to stop using it.
Also, just one thing to throw out there: it is completely fair to not be on social media.
Absolutely, especially right now. Social media, regardless of what platform you're looking at, is kind of a dumpster fire right now.
The one thing that Ian and I are kind of active on just for fun is Reddit. Honestly, it's one of the only ones that weirdly, there are definitely dumpster fires on Reddit, but it's weirdly easy to avoid them. If that makes sense.
I just want to see pictures of dogs, or I just want to see, you can see usually the only small section I'm interested in is wholesome content or dogs, or
Oddly satisfying.
Yeah, or like like OSHA violations. You're like, oh, that's a terrible place to put a ladder. Right, like whatever you want to see. Like, but you can like, I don't want to see any of the dumpster fires. I just want to see actual dumpster fire. Right? No.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. But I will say, a easy place for you to find out more about Ian is actually on our Kickstarter page.
Yep.
I just remembered that we have a little blurb all about you on our Kickstarter page. So check out tinyurl.com/Gnome Comics.
Go there if you want to learn more.
It out longer every time.
Yeah, every time I see you getting ready to slash, I panic because I can't remember which arm works on this camera.
It's magic.
Just do both.
Yeah, do both.
If you're running.
X.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you all so much for tuning in. This is the part where we do our little sign-offs. If you want to check out more of my own stuff, I also have links down in the YouTube doobly-doo. Or you could just find me at kelseydcrawford.com. I'll put a link up on the screen for a second because my name is spelled differently. It is KELCID Crawford.com if you'd like to find out more about me. Tune in next week on this channel, Sunday at 2 p.m. I will be doing another interview with CM Clemens and Kelly Swan about their short story For What the Gnomes Know. So be sure to tune in for that. We also have other live stream interviews happening for What the Gnomes Know, and you can find out more about that on our Kickstarter page at tinyurl.com/Gnome Comics.
Actually, since we're bringing up the other streams, one more thing to share.
Yes.
I just put it in the private chat. So our next interview stream is actually going to be on Monday, and it's going to be handled, which is going to be handled by our buddy J.M. Hunter, who was the artist.
You can find him on YouTube at Hunter Art Lab.
Yep. And yeah, he'll be streaming tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern, and he will be joined by Jack Wallace. They are the writer. The two of them are the writer-artist team on the story The Trial of Buck Regal. And Jack is also one of the founders of the Columbus Scribbler, which is an awesome 2-time Eisner Award nominated. Yep, there you go.
Oh, look at that. Ian being the model for us. Show us the magazine again.
Great comic newspaper that Ian and I are both in the fall issue. Is it the fall issue?
I think so.
Oh, yeah, something like that.
Dope.
Yeah.
And Ben, you are hosting another interview, I think. When are you doing that?
My interview will be on Thursday, and that interview is with a very special person who I totally remember exactly who they are, and very good, very close, very attractive person. Hold on, and they are.
We have a very big team, to be fair.
Drum roll, please.
Alex Washburn.
The creator of Gnome Armor and one of the people active in the chat.
Yes.
I'm doing a lot right now, you guys. Yes.
But see, you've given me so much more ammo to use, Ben, when I go to give you a hard time.
Yes.
I will say, whenever this live stream posts as a replay on my YouTube channel, I'll be sure to retroactively add the links to those live streams in the YouTube doobly-doo. So there will at least be that. That's, I think, all we've got for now. Ish, because we already, yeah, that's all we got for now. Thank you all so much for watching. You are awesome.
Rock on, guys. Never stop drawing.
Thanks, everybody.